You want to unmute for just a moment so I can figure out how you're doing.
Doing really well.
Okay, thank you, Laura Larson. Who else is out there?
Maddie Norman, I'm doing great. How you doing, Dr. Kohler?
Hi, Maddie Norman. Thank you for coming today.
Yes, ma'am.
Nice to see you. Who else?
Jessica Wiley's doing just fine.
Hey, Jessica, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It's been a while. Good to see you.
Yes.
Amy, how are you?
Great. How's everybody doing?
Doing all right. Hey, Laura, my goodness, look at all these people I know. Goodness. Michelle, Lamicia, Maddie. Oh, wow. Thank you all so much for coming today. I know it's really hot outside, and so this is a good place to be, inside. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and I don't know why. I feel like I have to sub-vocalize every time I do that. So here we go. All right. So I'm going to start off and just read this quote to you. As you can tell, there is a medieval labyrinth there, and there are, I think those are swans with their little baby swans. Can't remember what a baby swan's called. Maybe it's just called a baby swan. If you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Give them a tool instead, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. And so for the next hour, maybe a little more, I would like to make a case for using the labyrinth as a tool to use to help people with a new way of thinking, and in particular, to help kids with a new way of thinking. So I really want to thank all of you for deciding to spend some time with me today as we explore the labyrinth a little bit, especially as it might serve us in the classrooms where we work. So I'm going to ask on the front end for grace and forgiveness for anything that may seem a little dense as I share my study of the labyrinth with you. I want you all to know I am a student of the labyrinth and not so much an expert in the labyrinth. And I'm really excited to be looking at the labyrinth specifically in the classroom, and eager to share at the end briefly a research project that I'm embarking upon with my colleague, Dr. Rice. So I've drawn upon a lot of sources, and I would like to share some of them with you, because a lot of what I've put into this presentation comes from a variety of sources. I neglected to say on the front end that I am a Veritas trained labyrinth facilitator, and Veritas is an organization, and it is located in the San Francisco Bay area. And what they do is they train individuals to introduce the labyrinth in a coherent way to other people. So some of the sources I've drawn from are Labyrinthos, which is an organization in England, and Jeff Sayward is the founder along with his wife. I've drawn from the Labyrinth Society, from a woman named Dr. Jan Sellers and Bernard Moss, who wrote a book on using the labyrinth in education. Twyla Alexander, who is a labyrinth facilitator and one of my mentors. Lauren Artras, who actually brought the labyrinth to the United States in about 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and has really sort of spurned this contemporary labyrinth movement. And then John Rhodes, who is a researcher in the labyrinth. So here we go. There's my little Veritas certification. So I would like to begin with a little bit of my own story regarding use of the labyrinth. And I will say that no story is worth its telling unless it comes from the heart. You see this quote, "There's always room for a story that can transport people to another place." I don't know if I'll do that, but this is part of my story. Those of you who know me, and I think Melissa's the only one who really knows me in here, it's my sincere desire to be someone who is fully present. And much of my personal quest has centered on this whole notion that when I'm fully present, I have everything I need to give everything I have. And so in the spirit of my story, I want to share this as an introduction to the presentation. So I'm going to pick up this story throughout the presentation. And you see this man at the back of this labyrinth. That is actually my husband, Randy. And he's walking a much worn and quickly fading labyrinth outside of Canmore, Alberta province in Canada in 2019, prior to the pandemic. So this labyrinth was actually built for World Labyrinth Day a few years prior, and it was vanishing back into the earth. And so as Randy walked and I observed, I realized then that my growing fascination with the labyrinth was really developing to a deep, not yet fully understood passion. So I'm going to pick up this story in a little bit, but first I would like to share how we're going to spend our time. So for some of you, perhaps walking a labyrinth is a daily ritual. I don't know. It is a part of my daily ritual. I start my morning every morning walking a labyrinth. For some of you, this might be a new experience or a new topic. Some of you might just be curious enough to dig a little more deeply into the labyrinth. So hopefully I can provide something for each of you with the ultimate goal of using the labyrinth in the classroom. So I'll share some introductory information and include a little bit of history on the labyrinth and actually show you some websites where you can dig more deeply if you would like. And I'm going to embed my own story, and ultimately we'll look at and see how the labyrinth has been used in the classroom. But no discussion regarding the labyrinth is complete without a little walk ourselves. And so this presentation will be no different. If you haven't already, download a free app. It is Labyrinth Journeys app, and you might want to download that as I'm talking, because we're going to engage in a brief communal walk at the end of the session. It's Labyrinth Journeys. It's a free app. And so I'll just let you work on that as I move to the next slide. So the labyrinth. This is, let's see. I thought I had words on here, but I guess I don't. But I'm going to quote someone named Emily. And she posted this on June 26, 2020, which was kind of at the beginning of the pandemic. And what Emily said is that the labyrinth is a tool with the capacity to show us a new way of being in the world. Now think about this through the lens of the pandemic. It is a gift for uncertain times because it is a rare and precious thing. It is a universal symbol within which all of our perspectives can find a home. As a special educator, that part and the rest of this has really special significance to me. The labyrinth teaches acceptance, inclusion, and flow. It teaches about the universal path that we all walk on and its obstacles. It teaches inclusion of the other, both within and without, and to be in flow with all that is. We are held by its structure and by its winding path and received by its mystery. So what I would like for you all to do, I'm going to stop sharing. And let me see how many folks we have. I would like, since we're a small group, what I would like for you to do is just unmute yourselves for a moment and share what experience you've had with the labyrinth, if you've had any experiences or none at all. So you've already heard some of my experiences, part of the story. So I would kind of like to know what made you show up today and what are your experiences? So
Well, I have a little background in the historical use of labyrinths. And then the local Episcopal Church has a labyrinth and they've hosted labyrinth walks. So I know just the tiniest bit that it's used for mindfulness, for having something sacred, a daily sacred ritual, relaxation. I teach special ed at the elementary level, and a lot of kiddos need help with self-regulation, um, emotional management. And so I'm always looking for more tools to use. And I love that the Labyrinth integrates physical movement, because I think all kids need more physical movement in their day.
Absolutely. And Laura, I'm going to show you in a little bit of film with younger and older kids actually using the Labyrinth. Thank you. Who's next?
I have no experience and was very intrigued, and I just had to find out what this is all about. So that's why I'm here.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Thank you.
I also have no experience, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to learn more about it.
All right. Thank you. Am I pronouncing it right when I say Lamisha?
Lamisha, yes, Lamisha.
Okay, I put an extra syllable in there. Thank you, Lamisha.
You're welcome.
Maddie or Jessica?
I have no experience, and I was really just curious to see. I'm always trying to learn different things, and whatever could help me could also help my future students. So,
Okay, thank you, Jessica. And Michelle, I saw you put something in chat. Okay, all right. And Michelle said that she's unable to unmute just now. She thinks it would be a great activity to design with some students and maybe make some temporary installations. Absolutely. And she has the app. She's used it a few times. So she wants to visit a physical labyrinth. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Michelle.
And no, this is something new to me, Dr. Kohler, I joined because of your name. I didn't know what it was about.
Oh. Well, thank you, Maddie. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Okay, who have we not heard from? Someone with 609-287-2225.
Hello, yes. Hello, yes, this is Mary. Nice to meet you. I'm from New Jersey, and I'm very interested in labyrinths and wanted to learn more about them.
Wow, well, thank you, Mary. I'm glad that you have joined us. I've just flown through your state, but not visited it. So thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, so for some of you, this might be old information. For some of you, it might be new information. But I would like to just talk about what a labyrinth is. You're probably wondering, why am I so fascinated with them? And I think that hopefully will become clear as we work through this. So what is it? Well, it's not a maze. A lot of people say, well, a labyrinth is a maze, but a labyrinth is not a maze. A maze has multiple paths and is designed purposefully to be a puzzle. A labyrinth has only one path in and one path out. And so unless it is a contemporary pattern, a labyrinth is an archetype. So it's believed that the patterns in the archetypal labyrinths follow and honor something called sacred geometry. And what sacred geometry means is that there are symbols and sacred meaning to certain geometric shapes and certain geometric proportions. So if you'll think a minute, something you probably were exposed to in elementary science about astrology, about honeycombs, about snowflakes, and the pattern of the shell called the chambered nautilus. All of those are, the geometry is exquisite with all of those. And so it is believed, and you see actually on this slide, you can see the chambered nautilus. And then underneath you see a labyrinth that actually kind of follows the same pattern. So archetypes are governed by their own laws. and forms, this is a little woo-wooey, but forms in the collective unconscious, our generational unconscious, are universal and can be found throughout the world. And the labyrinth is an example of an archetype. And in a bit, I'm going to show you some pictures that show that these are thousands and thousands of years old and have been found in numerous places. So a moment ago, I said that a labyrinth was not a maze. So here is a picture of a maze. So if you'll just gaze at this for a moment, pick any path, pick any spot on it, and just sort of travel a little bit with your eyes.
Can you share your screen, Dr. Kohler?
Am I not doing that? I am
No.
so sorry. Oh my goodness. Well, what's wrong with me? Well, here, let me show you the chambered nautilus right there. All right, we were already there. I am so sorry. There, now. Next time I do that, yell at me. So can you see that there's some dead ends with this?
No, we just see your background on your computer.
You cannot see?
Huh?
All right, let me stop that. Let me try that again. Oh, goodness. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yay. All right. Okay, so following that little bit of conversation, this bottom part is certainly true. At some point, we all look up and realize we are lost in a maze. That applies to me right now. So now look at this and trace it with your eyes. And you might see that there are some dead ends there and you might get lost rather than having one path in and one path out. So that's the difference in a labyrinth and a maze. So thank you for getting me back on track. All right, the labyrinth has been found, as I alluded to earlier, in every culture, and there are examples that are peppered throughout the world. This labyrinth that you're looking at now is a temporary labyrinth, and you can tell it's made with stones on sand, so it's not going to last very long. But the labyrinth, the original labyrinths date back over 3,000 years. And there are two basic kinds. One is called a classical labyrinth, and the other is a medieval labyrinth, or the ones you see in cathedrals, or the ones that you might see in your church. But there are other kinds. There's a Roman mosaic labyrinth, there's a Baltic labyrinth, there are even Native American labyrinths, and ones that might symbolize the elder brother or the son father. But if you look at all of them, they all share the same commonality: one path in and one path out. So there's a website that is maintained by the Labyrinth Society, and it shows you where labyrinths are all around the world. So for a little snippet of my story with Randy, my husband, when we were traveling in Canada a couple of years ago, we used this labyrinth locator to find the one that we walked. And it was in the middle of a field, and it was off of a prominent walking pathway. We had to ask a few people where it was, but that's how we found it, because we went to Labyrinth Locator. So here's a little history. I mentioned Jeff Sayward's name not too long ago, and with permission, I have used some of the pictures that he has on his website. And so I am going to play a short video. It's about 1.5 to 2 minutes. And he's going to touch on the history of the labyrinth. And so these pictures, I'll just share what they are. The one at the top was found in Northwest Spain. That is actually a classical labyrinth. The one on the right is a vase from Italy. The one at the top was actually from the early Bronze Age, around 2000 years BCE. And the one at the bottom was on a coin in Crete, and it's believed to be 270 BCE. So these are quite old. So let's listen to Jeff talk a little bit about the labyrinth. Let me make sure I'm sharing my sound.
We can be sure. The history of the labyrinth goes back some 4,000 years or more. The earliest examples we have at the moment are prehistoric rock carvings, both in Europe and also in India. There, labyrinths found their way into the world of the Greeks and into the Romans. You find them as mosaics, particularly in Roman villas and public buildings. They found their way then into the early Christian church through manuscripts, into the floors of churches and cathedrals, and certainly by the medieval period, they'd spread as far as Arctic Europe, down into North Africa, as far away as places like Java and Sumatra, and also here in America amongst the Native American people, particularly down in the Southwest.
I think it's important to really be conscious of how different communities approach life. People kind of wonder, now, do I approach this somberly? Do I approach this silently? How do I walk? And so you tell them to bring their best selves or their most natural selves to it. And if it's an unusual experience for them and people haven't done it before, it's fun, you know, to be on the labyrinth together and to act like you do in your regular neighborhood. I see you over there, you know, I see you're a little bit ahead of me, and that's great. I'm supporting you. And so I think it really does mirror, you know, the dynamic that happens in our communities, which is a wonderful thing.
All right. So there are some themes that both of them talked about that I'm going to pick up in a moment. And that is kind of, how do you walk? What does that look like? So, but here are some other pictures of early labyrinths. This one in the lower left is from Croatia. This one is from Italy. The next one is from Switzerland. And this one down here is from Cyprus. So you can see, as I said earlier, they are found all around the world. And then here are some of the cathedral labyrinths. These are some of the ones found in churches. I'm going to come back to this first one with the largest picture, because that is found in Chartres, France. And then this one up at the top, the black and white, is in that's in Saint Quentin, France. And then this one in the lower right is found in Bristol, England. So going back to the first one, the Chartres, or some people will say Chartres, but I've heard it pronounced both ways. This is probably the most famous of the cathedral labyrinths. This labyrinth is much of the time it's covered up in chairs, but this is the one that Lauren Artris actually went and replicated in the San Francisco Bay Area. And you see variations of this labyrinth throughout the United States. So no conversation about labyrinths would be complete without a little bit of a attention paid to some of the terminology. So this also is another of the charts or medieval labyrinths. So if you look at it kind of closely, you can see that there are lots of rotations, but they don't go straight around. There are actually 4 different quarters. You could divide this in 4, and there are 4 quadrants, and there are about 28 turns in this one. But the rotations are called circuits. And the center of the medieval labyrinth has something that looks like a rose. And people ascribe different meaning to the center, because there are 6 little petals to the rose. And then you see these little cusps on the outside, these little kind of almost full circle little pieces, there are a certain number of these. I think there are 113, and those are called lunations. So there are all kinds of terms that we use to apply to the labyrinth. And some labyrinths have very predictable patterns. You go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. That's more like the the classical labyrinths. But this one, the medieval labyrinth, is very non-linear. The path is very unpredictable. And it makes sense that that is by design, because when you're walking and you are in meditation, you know exactly where you're going, then your mind might not be fully present to your experience. That's certainly been my experience. And the path is the part that you walk on. So back to my story. So we've looked at a little bit of history, and sometimes our stories begin to be told well before we even realize that they were being written. You know, they start as an idea, and we're not even sure that that idea is going to come to fruition. But the word idea comes from a Greek word that means form or pattern. And that's from the root word that literally means to see. So this is a photograph of my very first labyrinth. The experience took place in the early 1990s. And at the time, I lived in Little Rock, and I was very involved with the Oasis, which is a spiritual retreat center off of Cooper Orbit Road. And those of you who are from the area may be familiar with this area. On the grounds, they built this labyrinth, and they made it out of sand and brick. And I remember being very intrigued by the combination of meditation and walking to create a more holistic experience. And I think it was then that the seed for deeper exploration and study was planted in me. So I spent a lot of time out there. I spent a lot of time in silent retreat, and I walked in the woods, and I walked the labyrinth frequently. And it just was an amazing experience for me. And so that is actually my very first labyrinth. And here is the labyrinth that is in my backyard. After Randy and I returned from Canada, I asked him, please, 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 would you build a labyrinth in our backyard? And so we brought Robert Foray books. He's a labyrinth designer. And Randy measured and studied and measured and studied, and we argued and fussed. And finally, I just let the project go. I said, you build it however you see it. He's not as an enthusiast like I am. And so months later, this is what my sweet husband produced. It follows a pretty linear path. It goes back and forth and back and forth. And it's only 6 feet across, 16 feet across, but it's under an ancient pecan tree, and it's surrounded by 3 very deep sounding chimes. And I walk it every morning, and sometimes the chimes talk with me, and sometimes I actually even listen. And the last several mornings, I've been able to look up between the branches of the pecan tree, and I've seen Jupiter next to the moon. And that's in the early wee hours of the morning. That's been a quite beautiful sight for me. So this is probably why you came, to hear more about the labyrinth and education. Excuse me. So a lot of this information came from Dr. Jan Sellers and Bernard Moss's book on the labyrinth and education. It's called Learning with the Labyrinth. So in the 80s and 90s, the labyrinth was more used as a spiritual tool and more in the religious context. And a lot of the church labyrinths were built in the 80s and 90s. And then in the 90s and into the early 21st century, the labyrinth started to be seen more in hospitals and in healthcare. And then currently, the labyrinth has shifted into more of educational settings, both elementary, secondary, and higher education. If you're familiar with Conway, there is a labyrinth on the UCA campus, and there's also a labyrinth on the Hendrix campus. And as I'm not sure if Laura was referring to the one at St. Peter's, but there's one at St. Peter's Episcopal Church. So as we move more into talking about the labyrinth in classroom, I want to share this quote from Jeff Sayward. He's the one who narrated the video a minute ago. So here's his quote. Throughout the long history of labyrinths, whenever and wherever society is going through rapid change and development, the labyrinth has blossomed. Now humanity is seeking the sure path of the labyrinth in an uncertain and confusing world. So I think, why now? Why the labyrinth? And this quote was not made during the pandemic, but it certainly seems to apply now. And more importantly, do we not need to provide our future generations with every tool that we can? Labyrinths have blossomed in schools, colleges, and universities across the United States in recent years. And as of March, just a few years ago, there were almost 400 labyrinths located in schools or other educational centers, and 39 countries listed in the worldwide labyrinth locator. So I want you to watch another short video, and this is about labyrinths and their use in the schools. It's about 2 minutes long.
I became so involved in working with labyrinths in schools that people were constantly emailing me or writing or calling and saying, can you tell me how you did this and how you did that? And it was getting a little overwhelming to write another whole email each time. So I thought, well, if I could put it all together so that these answers to these questions are in a central place that people can have access to, it would make a lot of sense. I've never met a child that doesn't enjoy walking the labyrinth. Some have really profound experiences. The very first labyrinth we built, we were sitting around afterwards talking about it, and one boy said, my dog died a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't been able to handle it. I've just been really, really upset. And he said, after I walked the labyrinth, I realized my dog will live in my heart forever. Well, that was enough to say it was worth it.
We think that this may be the first university in the world to build a labyrinth specifically to support teaching and learning across the disciplines. We see it primarily as a teaching and learning resource. So people will come and walk the labyrinth individually as an opportunity for quiet reflection, a breathing space in their studies. And this, I think, is going to foster reflection, and that fosters creativity. So it's going to be a great resource for individuals. The labyrinth is situated close to a footpath and a cycle path that links the university and the city. So there is daily pedestrian and cycle traffic flowing past it. And those paths, by the way, also provide a wheelchair accessible route from the nearest car park. So it really is a very accessible location, but still a very quiet one because it's well away from the road. So people are walking it every day.
So before I advance, I want to go back to that, and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. So, having just been introduced briefly to history of the labyrinth, labyrinth terminology, and a smidgen of what the labyrinth is like in schools, what is bubbling up for you? What resonates with you, if anything?
I think it could be a useful tool for children who just need to refocus themselves if they're having a bad day or, um, they're having impulse control problems or something. It's something that's in their control, to walk and to think and to have a cool down period.
Thank you, Amy. In a moment, I'm going to actually show part of a DVD that has adolescents using the Labyrinth for just what you described. Thank you. Other thoughts? Michelle wrote, the meeting in the middle. I love that about it as well. The middle is my favorite part. Walking in is the most difficult for me, and I'll share why in a few moments. Other thoughts? Jessica.
I think it gives them like a purpose. You're not just you're meandering, but you're meandering with a purpose. So you're taking all that energy, just like when we have to drive, we have to, pay attention to so many things, but here you're just following pretty much a path that is kind of unrestricted, so you don't have to worry about tripping over anything, or like you're just putting all your energy into that and you're able to kind of just focus. And especially since it's outside, you're kind of getting that nature aspect. And typically when you're outside in nature, it's more relaxing than when you're in a classroom or in a room and confined and stressed.
Yes, what a great observation. They're not all outside, but I think the combination of the natural and the path and the quietness and just the whole meditative nature of it. Yes, I think they all sort of come together serendipitously. All right, I think you have something to say. Laura? No? Oh, I just wondered if you had something to add to this.
Yeah, yes. Well, I was thinking in terms of our kiddos who have very low language skills, low receptive, low expressive language, that it's not language oriented. Like a lot of mindfulness techniques and coping mechanisms that we're teaching our kiddos are great when your language is a little bit higher. So for our low language kids, I think it's a really good tool.
Ah, what a great observation. Thank you. Lamisha or Maddie, thoughts that you might have?
Well, just piggybacking off of what Jessica said, I was thinking too, when the students or when you're just walking, with our students, I'm thinking being in the special classroom, when they're walking, they need to know, that to redirect that bad energy to where it's a common mechanism. And then now that I'm doing this, what will I do differently when I get back to the room or when I get back to where this come up again? I'll know. I don't even have to say, I can just get up and walk and do what I need to do and come back and have a better day.
Beautifully spoken, Maddie. Thank you. Michelle asked, is it as visual when you're actually walking it? I would say for me, it is. I will also say sometimes this has to do with the visual aspects. I've gotten lost in the labyrinth. And when I have, maybe not one like the one on let me go right here and share the screen back. Maybe not like the one here made with stones, but I've gotten lost on labyrinths that had sort of an etched path. And so that's okay if you get lost. So it is a very visual experience. It's also experience that might lead us to, while we are taking it all in visually and through the rest of our senses, might serve kind of as a metaphor for life. When I got lost as even my vision, this is why I'm telling this story. My vision was distracted. I was in New Harmony, Indiana, not too long ago, because they're famous for their labyrinths. And I was walking on this beautiful etched granite labyrinth, and I got lost because I was watching 3 raccoons over in a field, just kind of running along a fence line. And so my vision was distracted. And then I kind of laughed to myself. I thought, well, here I am, labyrinth girl. And I got lost on this labyrinth. And then I reminded myself, you know what? It's okay. Doesn't matter if I got lost. I could either start where I was and go and see if I got to the middle or not. Or what I actually did was I just walked to the edge and I said, okay, I think I'm going to be more present this time. And I just walked it again. So I don't know if that answered your question, Michelle, but I would say yes, it is a very visual experience, even when our vision is drawn to something else. So this is what the research will offer us regarding the labyrinth. And on my notes, I circled so many of these words, and this is something that Maddie and Laura both talked about. The labyrinth can offer timeout. Who doesn't need that? It offers opportunities to re-energize, to refocus, to reduce stress, to seek clarity, to facilitate calm, to nurture our soul, which is more of a spiritual kind of reference, but all of those others have great application in the schools. It promotes relaxation, mental quiet. I think about our kids who struggle with attention deficit. Mental quiet is kind of nice. It lowers levels of somatic stress, and it lowers worry and negative emotions. This is what the research tells us about the labyrinth. It reduces stress levels in nursing students, college nursing students, 90 days after they incorporated use of the labyrinth in their own personal practices. So you can think about what our students need. They need times to re-energize. They need times to have stress reduced. They need all of these things, and the labyrinth is a way to help them achieve this. Here's some more research. It creates calm. It opens one's intuition and creativity. So creativity is also a benefit of walking the labyrinth. It may heighten creativity, produce a higher sense of consciousness. I think about some of our kids who, all of our kids, I started to say gifted and talented, but this applies to all of our kids. Relaxation, clarity, peace, centeredness, openness. Maybe we all need to be walking it, and not just our kids. Quiet, reflectiveness, reduced anxiety. So there's so much out there. And John Rhodes, this person here, actually is someone who's been communicating with me regarding research that we're going to do. So I'm going to start now and go from higher ed down to elementary. So this is what we know about the use of the labyrinth in higher ed from some of the research. It's a nice outreach application. And in this particular case, it was in a college counseling center. In nursing, this was reported that labyrinth should be an essential part of nursing education, especially since you see so many of them in hospitals and care centers. It's a way to bring mindful practice to both students and faculty. So there's some of the research in higher education. And this is a quote that I borrowed from Jan Seller's book, but it was made by a college student. And she said, "A feeling of awe and respect permeated me as I walked the labyrinth. I entered with respect and left feeling like I have overcome so much fear, hatred, and negative emotion. The finality of the walk represented a new beginning for me and represents hope and peace. That's a pretty powerful comment made by a student from her experience of walking the labyrinth. So here are some other older student uses. And a lot of these came from Jan Seller's book, but also came from some of the other resources that I mentioned at the beginning. You might use it to stimulate creativity by focusing prior to a course project. It can invite calm by walking before an exam. Probably would work every bit as well as some of the medications we take. It offers a place to take a break from class schedules. It provides a space for transformative learning. It's an inclusive space, and it invites students to find peace. So I am going to stop here, and actually I have my little video pieces mixed up. The video illustration to which I'm referring is for older students, but I have one for younger students. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to play a little bit of a video showing younger students, and then I'm going to move it to the place that is marked for older students, if you all will indulge me with that. So let me find this, and I'm going to scoot this over here. I'm going to leave it right here. Can you all see that? Yes, no? Okay. So let me share this screen. This one right here. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yay. Okay. This is, let me just introduce this. This is from a DVD entitled Labyrinth Journeys, the same thing as the app I asked you to download. And this is a grandmother walking a neighborhood labyrinth, but you're going to hear from her grandchildren their comments about it. Now they're younger children, but I'm going to show you in a minute some older children.
When you get up in the morning that you'd like to spend a half hour in quiet in a beautiful space walking in concentric circles. But I think there are some similar things in that you get in touch with yourself, your body, your breathing.
One thing that has really surprised me is how much children have enjoyed this labyrinth. I think children use this particular labyrinth more than adults do.
I think it's really special because usually when you see labyrinths, they're like in special places, or you go especially just to see them. So to have them in a neighborhood like this, it's a really cool opportunity for other kids. My grandmother and I, when we come here, it's really cool to walk around it and spend time together and really like think about things, and also talk while we're walking around it about something that might relate to the labyrinth or about what we've done this week. Just going around it really like just clears your head. I like imagining all the different ways I can try to walk the labyrinth and feel different emotions. Sometimes I run, sometimes I walk. I just do different things to have fun. I think that I like to have fun with it a little more than Kira, because she just walks it with Grandma, but I like to do it with my grandma, with Kira, and independently. I like to just switch it around.
On Halloween, I think every child within 10 miles of here comes to our labyrinth. And the children just flock here. I just love it so much, I can't stand it.
Are you a robot?
Okay, now I'm going to move to this other segment where older children are using the labyrinth. Okay. All right, this is the end of a previous. Okay.
Emotional issues. Walking the labyrinth for the first time, a third of the way through, I felt something changing in me as far as my thought process. They helped me realize that I have a new journey and there's a new reason for me being here. And I realized that the world I had built, my world, was so minuscule and insignificant. And there's so much more out there. If you were to ask anyone around me, they would say, yeah, he's normal. He's back to 100%, even though I'm not. I've learned to cope with my deficiencies and overcome.
I'm going to interrupt for a moment. That young man has a traumatic brain injury, and the labyrinth has helped him regain some of his wholeness. That was not the segment of video that I was referring to, but here it is coming up now.
School can be very nerve-wracking. Life can be very nerve-wracking, and anxiety is a very real thing. And just knowing that first time when I came in here and I saw this labyrinth, the fact that I just sighed in relief, knowing that it's here, it's a safe haven.
The chill room, which is kind of akin to a meditation room, is an essential vehicle that we provide to all of our students, which enables them to regain their emotional balance when they feel anything out of kilter. And of course, being adolescents, they're oftentimes out of kilter, and no matter what kind of learning is happening, they're not going to be able to partake in it until they get back to a state of a healthy, calm mind. The labyrinth is a particularly straightforward, easy, effective, quick tool for achieving that kind of healthy state of mind or balance, that when it works for particular students, it's almost miraculous.
We feel a lot and we're very complex, and often when schools are being set up, that's not taken into account. The fact that a student may have a terrible day and just need to get away and have a place where they can feel what they're feeling. And I don't know why it's not a common thing, because it's very simple. It's a very simple thing to just tape up a labyrinth.
I was in a class I didn't really like, and there was a bit more work than I felt comfortable with. And that, for a while, sort of felt really overwhelming and inescapable. Walking a labyrinth, it's something that sort of takes me out of that stress and lets me sort of get an outside perspective that it's not a constant thing, that the stress isn't constant, it's something finite, and that's something that is definitely not as big of a problem as I really think it is. It can be considered one whole experience with a very definite beginning and end, and that end is sort of a nice, exactly that, sort of a nice deep breath, a release.
I think my mind is well, it's very aware of my body. And in that, my body's aware of itself. And I'm aware of each step I'm taking, which if you're normally walking down a hall to a class or to wherever, it's just, I have a destination. When you're walking a labyrinth, it's more, I have a journey that may come to a destination.
Thoughts about that?
it was relaxing just watching them do it.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Amy. I thought the same thing. It is. This is a DVD that I got through Veritas where I received my training, and it's full of examples and from hospitals and the community, and it's very relaxing to watch. And I love the video, especially of the older kids. And their reflections, and there seems to be so much pain in that young man's face, and it seems like the labyrinth helps bring some relief and release from that. Other comments? All right, then I'm gonna move back over here. I'm about to get the hang of this share screen, even though I rehearsed earlier. All right, so. All right, come on, let's go. Okay. All right, so these are some pictures of Labyrinth use with younger students. And I think I might have skipped, no, I don't think I did skip one, or maybe I did. Let me go back here. Yes, I did. So as we kind of saw with those kids a minute ago, kids respond immediately to the pattern of a labyrinth. And sometimes they want to race into the middle and race out again as fast as they can. But they can also, as you heard earlier, they can use it to deal with grief or to deal with conflict resolution or problem solving, celebrating joyful events. Teachers have found all kinds of ways to use the labyrinth. And this one actually is called Peace Maze, and this came from the Labyrinth Society, Labyrinths and Places, and it's a rainbow colored 7-circuit labyrinth, and it was painted on a playground and displayed the language. You can't read this language, but it displayed the language of conflict resolution at each one of the turns. So I thought that was a pretty creative way to use it. And then these pictures are from an art project entitled Living Labyrinths for Peace. And so in this particular application, students are walking it to find a path to themselves, to stimulate their creativity, to express their wishes, and to make decisions and resolve conflicts. And in this particular project, they learn labyrinth vocabulary, they make labyrinth books, and they actually painted that 12-foot square labyrinth dedicated to other children in their school. And here's another, this is also from the Labyrinth Society. And so in this, families and family activities are incorporated. And you see the young lady on the right, she is actually learning to draw a classical labyrinth using something called a seed pattern. I've been to labyrinth drawing and labyrinth building school. That's what I call it, but it's not really what it's called. And you see that she starts with this plus sign, and then there are these 4 little dots. That's one way of beginning to draw a labyrinth. I find myself, if you look at any of the things that I write on, I draw them all the time on my calendar, and it's very meditative just to draw them. So those are some other ways that it can be used with young children. So this picture right here is actually one of the labyrinths that I walked in New Harmony, Indiana, about 3 weeks ago. There's a little stone building in the center, and New Harmony was built as a utopia. It didn't work very well, but this hedge labyrinth is still there, and it is absolutely beautiful. And I thought I would just insert a picture here. What I was originally going to do was show it another of those video clips, but you've already seen both of them, so I'm just told on myself. Okay, so here On the left and on the right are finger labyrinths. And finger labyrinths, on the left, this is the Chartres medieval labyrinth, and on the right is the classical labyrinth. So this is a great picture to kind of show the differences between the two side by side. And truthfully, it is believed that the one on the right predated the one on the left. But I will say the one on the right is the one that is my personal favorite. Most people gravitate toward the cathedral labyrinth, but I love the classical labyrinth. But both of these are finger walkable. And since you all are downloading that Labyrinth application, then you may walk a finger labyrinth at any time you want to. And when you have a finger labyrinth, you can, anytime you might need one, you don't have to go find one. There's one right there for you. And I am going to show you, in my office, where's my, okay. I have this one that a friend of mine made. That's a replica of the one at St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Conway. And here's one that is a little pewter labyrinth, and I just use a little stick with it. I carry, this is a little cardboard one. I don't know if you can see it. I just carry that in my wallet. And then most people think this is crazy, but I also have, I have one that is etched in my arm, so I will always have one with me if I can't find another. So, all right. So here's another, I'm kind of closing in on the end of this, and we're getting ready to do our little walk. But here's another use that applies to students of all ages. World Labyrinth Day, I referenced that earlier in my own story with my husband and when we were in Canada. It's held annually on May 1st. And if any of you were near the College of Education this past year on or about May 1st, you might have seen these. Well, with our dean's permission, I was able to draw these in front of both our main entrances at UCA. And this is a Chakravayu labyrinth, which is another of my favorite patterns. And so I provided literature inside the building so that anyone who wanted to walk it could find out a little bit more about this labyrinth. And I have to tell on myself, this labyrinth is about 18 feet across. And as you can tell, it's made with chalk. And so my husband has made me this amazing chalk. It's just a stick with chalk on the end, and he's done it 2 or 3 different ways, and sometimes chalk comes off, but it really, this particular one that he's made works well. I also have one that has tape on the end of it. But we came out here at UCA to build this temporary labyrinth, or draw this temporary labyrinth, and Randy kept refilling the chalk for me. And the first one, which is the one on the left, I have drawn these a million times. Well, I got lost. I got lost in my circuits. And there were people that were standing around and watching. And the more people watched, the more I got lost. I got really frustrated. Randy was trying to offer sweet, kind advice, and I was not taking it, didn't want to take it, and was thinking I'm supposed to be able to do this. And I was just getting really angry at myself mostly. And it was warm because it was May in Arkansas. And so I excused myself, went into the building and went to the bathroom, and probably telling more than you want to hear, but as I was sitting in the bathroom, I had my notes with me and I had my pencil in my other hand. So I just took a deep breath and I just went, that's it. And I kind of recalculated and I went back out and I immediately finished drawing it. And the next morning, the one on the right, I drew the one on the left took well over an hour. The one on the right took maybe 10 minutes. And I say all that to say the metaphor for me with all of that was just to be present, just to be present. If I had remained present with myself for the first one, it would not have taken as long as it did. However, the lesson learned was very valuable to me. And now when I look at these pictures, I'm reminded of that story, which is just be present. And the labyrinth sometimes teaches presence. So, okay. I want to read something now from Pathways of Peace. Teacher Notes and Preparation Ideas from World Labyrinth Day in Schools 2021. And I bet this can resonate with all of you. As teachers, we are practically hardwired to thinking in terms of outcomes, those things that we can see students do, explain, write, and show. We set our intentions for lessons or units, and we are very explicit about what we're looking for students to demonstrate so that we can see that they got it. Working with labyrinths is a little different. This is body work. Laura, this really reminds me of what you said. This is letting our minds have a rest for a while. And for a lot of us, reading our bodies is something we've not had much experience with. The same goes for young people. And so we need to allow space for this to happen. When we still our minds, we allow awareness to arise. Using a reflection at the end of each labyrinth activity may give students something to ponder and think about. It gives them time to just sit with their questions and find their answers. All right, so the common denominator for all labyrinths in all settings is that the labyrinth can help us be present for ourselves. It has great meditative benefits. It's the perfect, this is some of my doodling on the right. It is the perfect classroom tool. So it seems, if we reflect back on the quote that I had at the beginning, the one that said, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them, give them a tool instead, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. And my job, and those of you who know me, I co-direct the UCA Mashburn Center for Learning. And one of our main quests is to get the best tools into the hands of students through their teachers. Perhaps that's one reason why I am so drawn to the labyrinth, because to me it is such a tool for students of all ages. The labyrinth represents unity. Think about what unity means. Wholeness. It can be temporary, ancient. You don't have to believe anything to walk a labyrinth. You just need to be present. You can walk for a long time, a short time. You can walk with your fingers, your eyes, your feet, whatever you want to. These are some temporary labyrinths that I actually built when I was going through labyrinth building school. One's made out of quilt fabric, one's made out of old oak planks, and one's made out of my mother-in-law's buttons. So I told you earlier, I'm engaged in a research project with my colleague, Dr. Rice, and we're going to collect data for the first semester this fall on students' experiences with the labyrinth. I'm very excited to be doing that. So now let's move to walking ourselves. So there are several ways to walk. So just lift up something that resonates with you. Here's some things that help to release whatever's in your way. You could ask and listen and set an intention. You can walk a dream. You can explore images that emerge. You can use with a mantra. You can walk it any way you want. A lot of people say, is there a right way or a wrong way to walk the labyrinth? The answer is no. You start in the middle. You can work your way out. You can work your way in. Just know that there's one path in and one path out. This is something I do most of the time. I work on the way in to release, to let go, to quiet, to shed, get rid of something that's on my mind. When I'm in the middle, I try to just open up and feel present and receive. And then when I return, I try to reflect. And a lot of people use this process for walking the labyrinth. So if you haven't already, download that Labyrinth Journey app. You just can type in, if you haven't, here's a short video on what that looks like. Or not. Here it goes. This is giving you a moment to okay, so you can see that it just responds to touch. Does everyone have it? I have it too on my iPhone. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just, I brought a little chime, and that will just start, and we'll walk for 2 or 3 minutes, and you can turn off your screen if you want or leave it on if you want. And then I will chime again, and wherever you are, you can just come back out and just be quiet and be with yourself. So this might be your first labyrinth walk, or it might be your 100th. Okay. Okay, everyone have that? So you know what? Let me get mine up because I want to walk with you. This is a communal walk, and it doesn't make sense if I don't have mine up. It's coming. All right, there it is. It's not quite, okay, there it is. All right. I'm just going to do this for maybe 3 minutes. So here we go. So my question to you is, what was that experience like?
You know, with me, when I started, it automatically took me like to the garden, and I was with Jesus, and and I had been praying about some things in my life in the upcoming school year. And with that walk, I got so relaxed, tears started rolling, but it was like prayers and things were being answered. And it's like I could hear God saying, I'm with you even until the end. And it was like it was so real, and it was just so relaxing. So I'm ready.
Maddie Norman, you brought tears to my eyes, girl.
I have them in mind too, but it's okay.
Oh my goodness.
And my grandson, they just moved to Texas, and he's had such bad years. He's going through that adolescent, and I'm thinking I need to get to Texas and see if there's one somewhere and tell my daughter what she needs to do. And I wish she was here in this with me with this. So I need to share this experience with her for him.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Others of you want to share your experience?
I have to be completely honest. I had to leave work, and now I'm in my car. And while you were doing that exercise, I do have the app, and I've played with it a few times. But what I was doing while you were doing that was thinking of how I would do something like that in my backyard, and how I would convince my husband to do this with me. And then I'm thinking maybe I need to start small and embroider one, or then maybe make like a little fairy one that I could show him first. So like I was literally like designing in my brain like the spaces in my yard where I might accommodate a space like this. So I was definitely setting intentions, but not the same way you.
Michelle, that's wonderful. What that reminds me of is that there's no right or wrong way to walk. There's no, sometimes I've walked and I have been moved to weep. Other times I have walked and have just been totally lost in something else. And sometimes I walk and it's like, boom, this is what you need to do. So it is an amazing, amazing tool. There's no expectation from it or for it. It's just what it is. And it is an ancient symbol of unity and wholeness. And for whatever, I guess, how sometimes when you get a dog, you say, I didn't choose that dog chose me. Well, I didn't choose the labyrinth. I think the labyrinth chose me. Thank you, Lamisha. Calming and clearing of the mind for me. It inspired creativity, all kinds of experiences. Thank you. Anyone else want to share before I start sharing my screen again?
I'll share it. When I was doing it on my phone, while I was actually doing it, I was like in a relaxed state, but I kept getting notifications on my phone, and it made me so mad. I was like, would you just stop it? I can't. Like, I would just like swipe up and then like go back to figure out where I was. So at the moment when I was in it, it was great. Next time I'll just have to mute all notifications.
Jessica, that's such a great story. It's sort of a reminder that the labyrinth can speak metaphorically to us. We start off and then we get pulled here, pulled there, or something. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. No one has to speak, but I don't want anyone not to speak if they want to. So
I did also want to share that, like, I normally one of the things that I teach in school districts is, the infusion of maker spaces in the classroom. And I just see so many opportunities to feeling out like how to get the students to lay one out, using that STEM-based opportunity to lead to that SEL outcome. So it's just very, very, my mind is literally going in 50 different directions.
Ah, I love that. I just went over to Makerspace here at UCA a couple months ago and had them show me how, well, they didn't show me how to do anything. They did it all for me. I took a piece of cedar that was about 11 inches square and maybe an inch thick that Randy had cut for me. And I took them a piece of paper that had the classical labyrinth on it, and they made it right there. It's hanging on my wall at home. So that was, yeah. So now
it's very interesting because I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I could probably do something on the wall that the students could trace with their hands, like those sensory walls that we do in the classroom hallways. Like I could maybe print out vinyl on the Cricut machines or use a projector and have the students paint them so they could, just right outside of my classroom in case there's not one of those quiet rooms that you could have one indoors. Just crazy.
Wow, you've given me some great ideas too. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. I like fabric, and this is actually the one on the right hand side of this is actually one I sewed on a quilting square for my best friend when she turned 70 last year. I used just those little strips. And this quote here is from someone from Arkansas House of Prayer. This is kind of taken on a little bit of a spiritual feel, but I think that it's hard to separate some of the spiritual from the not spiritual. And she says, as I leave my meditation cushion and climb the path to walk the labyrinth, I feel deeply rested and restored. I remain in a place of peace and gratitude for hours after taking just 30 minutes to an hour of the day to be nurtured in silence. And I love that quote, and I love actually that place. So before I leave you, I want just to show you some selected resources. This first is a book by Twyla Alexander. This is a story that just gives me chills now. I was just really called by the universe, I guess, to start pursuit of this labyrinth quest. And so I found this book that I was going to order. And so I was ordering it, and as I was ordering it on my phone, I was walking across campus to a meeting, and I ran into another colleague, and she said, you need to order that book by Twyla Alexander. And I said, well, I'm ordering it right this minute. And then she said, and Michelle, you are the one person who probably won't get this, but she said to me, Twyla Alexander lives in Conway, Arkansas. Well, that's my community, and it is a tiny little place. And so I have since initiated and had reciprocated a wonderful relationship with this woman who is kind of my labyrinth mentor. This next is a book, Lauren Artris. I've referred to her earlier. She's like the amazing person who does labyrinth trainings all over everywhere. This next is a wonderful book called Through the Labyrinth. It is like a coffee table book, but it's 2 inches thick, and it has pictures of every labyrinth ever known to man. The next is the book to which I referred, Learning with the Labyrinth. And then I want to just show you these a few of these resources. This is a Worldwide Labyrinth Locator. Worldwide Labyrinth Locator is all you have to do is identify where you're headed, and it will identify labyrinths that are there for you. These people's names who I've mentioned, it's a small community of people who are labyrinth enthusiasts, but there's Lauren's name and there's Jeff Sayward's name down below there, but there's the Worldwide Labyrinth Locator, and that's how I actually found the one in Canada. This is the Labyrinth Society. You saw two, no, this is where I received, or I got a lot of some of the ideas for kids from here. And this, I want to show you this. This is Jeff Sayward's website. He's the guy who spoke. He looks a little like Tiger King, but he has this amazing photo library. So I'm just going to click on and show you. There are pages and pages of these labyrinths, and you see some of the ones that I actually used. I contacted him and asked him if I could have permission to use his photographs, and he gave me that permission. But look, there are just pages and pages. Look at all these different kinds of labyrinths, and this is an amazing website if you want to engage in self-study. Veritas, that is the organization through which I've received my training, and they do offer training, and they offer all kinds of videos. There's some videos there. You know, it's amazing what technology can do. And then here are some other resources on Veritas. Oh yes, I wanted to be sure and go to this. This is compiled by a man named Lars Hallett, and I'm so sorry I've neglected to mention him. He is he's a Labyrinth Builder Junior. He is the one who taught me how to build temporary labyrinths. But he has all these ideas for exploring labyrinths in the classroom through art, math, music, service learning, social studies, language arts, PE, health, ritual, and common materials, and some more resources there. And so there are, this is on the website as well. So you have all of these different resources, and I love his ideas for using the labyrinth in the classroom. So I wanted to be sure that you knew that all of those links were there and to use them. And I see there's something chat. Yes, okay, thank you, Michelle. All right, Melissa, I called you Michelle, I'm so sorry. So let me stop sharing and see what questions you have, comments, anything that we have not talked about that you would like to talk about. You can see I'm a little bit over the top with it, but I do love it.
So I definitely have questions about like the sacred math and the visual design of it. If there's anything you could maybe speak to.
Okay, that is, you know, thank you, Michelle, for that question. I will say that I am not the best, but my dad was an engineer, and so mathematics and music are, you know, there's a high correlation between the two. So both of those are in my, not so much the math, but the music. And so I didn't speak to all of this, but there I can direct you. I have your contact information, but I can direct you to some places where you can do some exploration. All of the numbers of, especially the cathedral and the medieval labyrinths, the number of times they go around, the petals in the center, the little lunations around, they all have some sacred meaning. And like the rose petals in the center, A lot of people say that the first one stands for the mineral world. The second stands for flora. This third is the animal world. The fourth is human. The fifth is angelic world. And then the last one stands for the cosmos. Now, I know when I walk, I always walk and go and stand in each one, and I just look up and look around and try to breathe that in. But I can direct you. In fact, let me make a note to places where you can find out more information about that.
Yeah, I guess because I feel like spiritually as an individual, that a lot of that would be fine to explore, but in a classroom where we're much more constrained as the things that we can talk about, I feel like, we're not able to focus on as many of those spiritual sides, which is sad when you know that that's like what it's supposed to draw upon. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way as me, but I have to figure out like how to couch this in terms that won't get parents angry with me. You know what I mean? Like stuff, you know what I mean? It's a struggle.
And thank you for, and I know that you voiced what we all think. And, we are spiritual beings living a human experience, regardless of what we believe. It doesn't matter. No beliefs are a full slate of beliefs. But I think that there's the notion of unity and wholeness that transcends. That is that's what they stand for, and that's what they bring. And kids can find their own experience with it. There's a lot of documented evidence that it helps kids in classrooms, and it helps them reconnect with themselves, helps them be more creative. It helps them calm down. It helps them be recentered to resolve conflict. So whether it's one that I love your idea of just drawing it, and there's a whole historical piece. So I don't know what level you teach, but just the whole notion that these things are everywhere and that they're all over the world and they have different meanings to different people. I love that aspect. Anything that is unitive versus divisive to me is where I want to spend my time. So thank you for talking about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Anderson, I saw you wanted to say something earlier.
Well, there's also this analytical side that I think we all have that makes me think about, the whys. Why does this have an effect on our bodies and souls and minds? Is it like a proprioceptive type thing where our bodies in movement, and is it just a physical way to focus our mind at the same time during movement that makes it relaxing? I just think about, is there research on why this promotes peace and calm and that kind of thing?
I think
that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I would say yes and yes. And I think depending on who you talk to, you'll get a million different answers. I just attended a week-long session with Lauren, and she's in the ministry, but her whole life is Labyrinth. And she talks about, now this is the little spiritual end of it, she talks about it kind of being a liminal space, kind of between here and here, that is just almost otherworldly. And I think, well, something that is all over the world and occurred irrespective of others probably has some otherworldliness aspect to it, that whole archetype. And so that resonates with me, and it resonates with me on a spiritual level and on a not spiritual level. But I think that just the combination for me, if I take the spirit piece out of it, the combination of meditation, which that we know the benefits of meditation, and the walking, the movement, if you just put those two together, it's 1 + 1 equals a lot more than 2. And so, and then with all the way that that they meander sometimes makes you be present, that is an added piece. And then the quiet, I mean, all of those things I think just make for an amazing experience sometimes, and sometimes it just makes for a few more steps on my walking app. But you know, it's wherever. I know I came clean, didn't I? It's where it's just, it is what it is. So that's a great I don't know if that was a question or observation, but whatever it was made great sense. And then we saw what a profound effect it had on Maddie when she walked, and just how it just opened up her heart and soul. So I just say, go walk, find the labyrinth. You know where to find them. You've got an app on your phone, and just approach it with an open mind and see what it brings. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll just say namaste. The divine in me greets the divine in you with gratitude. So thank you all for being here.